This video was made in, I think, 1981. I had not seen this mother. This one. I had not seen this mother since the birth until 3 weeks ago. And she came to visit me and our community again. She was a member of our community, and each of her babies backed into the world. By that I mean they were breech births. And for those of you who may think that all babies come with a head first, it's about 3 to 4 or sometimes 5% wish to step into the world or back into the world. And this is a lost art now. Doctors who know how to do this often get punished. Yeah. And midwives also. Here in Austria, I know midwives who are punished because they know how to do this. And some women want to avoid cesarean section. This is a big problem. So this is part of my work. At the time this video was made, I didn't know that attending a breech birth could be seen as a crime. And more often today, I would have the mother standing on her knees. That can make it a little easier. But her husband could not come, so they had to talk by telephone. You can see how old-fashioned the phone is, but we thought we were pretty modern to have a telephone at all at that time. She flew to us from Connecticut one day before she went into labor. And that was when she learned that she was to have an unwanted and really unnecessary cesarean. This is typical that a mother would be moving and changing position frequently. This makes birth less painful and more effective to recognize the force of gravity, which is not suspended when women go into labor. Too often, this is forgotten in hospitals, where it seems that we pretend too often that it's better for the woman to lie on her back, but really this is a habit that makes the institution the boss of the woman, and we'd like to change that. This mother had never had any pain medication. What makes her deal with the sensation of labor is to have her friends there and a very calm atmosphere. I do wear gloves now. But this was before we knew about AIDS. Now you see the baby's bottom. And the mother's bottom is opening very nicely, and she's just making sounds like, you know, that kind of sound. It helps the mother to see how much of the baby has come out. I think the babies are very cute when they come this way, so it doesn't scare me. And most of the parents now want us midwives to be quiet and not say what the gender is, even though the baby's peeing on us in the various ways they do it. And normally the breech baby will weigh a little less than if it come head first, because this packing material we call meconium, which is not really poop, but it comes out of the poop place. This comes out, so the baby weighs less. But not a problem. That was not the baby anyway. So see, we're going very slowly here. And I don't tell the mother to push. I just tell her how well she's doing. Because women like praise, they don't like orders when they're giving birth. Now you can see these fat little legs. Those of you who are Caucasian, most of you might be surprised by the color of the baby, but babies with dark skin come out with much lighter skin. And then the hue will change a little bit as during the first week of life. Now the part of the baby that must breathe comes out. There she is. This baby weighs about 4 kilos. And you can see no blood. And this is because the mother's body opens quite well. This is just a piece to show us that sometimes the baby's head is slow to come out, the neck is still inside, and then we must let the baby's body hang so that the chin will be onto the chest. Then the head can come out without breaking the neck. It's typical for us to have the mother with her best friends there, because this keeps her relaxed, and we make little jokes. The reason for this is when the mother's in a good humor and calm, and maybe a sense of humor is activated, she has much less pain and sometimes no pain. This is because our bodies are so well equipped that when we're calm, you get an opiate that is called neuroendorphin, and this makes labor and birth quite bearable. What we're doing here, when you stimulate the nipples, you get nature's oxytocin, which is produced by the woman's body, and then you don't have to put it through an IV or with an injection. So we're helping her again so that the placenta can come, and this is helped also by gravity. It was actually Europe that invented the fashion of putting the woman on her back with her legs in the air. This came from Louis XIV, and then this set the fashion, and Europe followed, and then America followed. And maybe this was good for the doctor's back, but not so good for the woman giving birth. So we midwives, we tend to get on the floor. We follow the woman around in her house and find out what room she'll give birth in. She might even go outside. If so, we follow her there. I can't tell you how happy you are whenever a baby comes and everybody's healthy. This is heaven on earth. And I feel that's every woman's right to give birth in the way she wants, so she doesn't feel forced into somebody else's choice. Now, both of these births will show what doctors regard as a complication. And what you can see going on here is how calm our midwives function when there's something out of the ordinary. In this case, you're going to see that the baby, who is 5 kilos, mother's biggest, gets stuck after the head is born. And then you will see a maneuver that I learned from midwives from Guatemala who cannot read and whose skills are not recognized by the World Health Organization. But in spite of all that, they're world experts on how to deal with certain birth complications, such as the one you'll see. This is my partner, a midwife herself. This is the birth of her 4th child. And you'll see a way that she deals with the pain of labor. She said she knew she had to try very hard this time to remain calm because she had a bigger baby. She could feel this. And so you're going to see her method of coping with any labor discomfort. That's it. She pulls her husband to her and they make out. That's our sort of slang for kissing and cuddling. I think a woman giving birth should look really beautiful, and that was always my guide, because the first birth I ever saw, here we go, he has to do what she wants, and this makes the pain go away and makes her body open. Because when a kiss is very good, the blood of the man and the woman leaves the brain and goes to the bottom part. That's the part that must open. This works quite well, and it's very inexpensive and not at all dangerous. And it makes it so the husband is also quite relaxed. The feeling in the room should be something like when they made the baby. Because this is, birth is with our sexual organ, it's not with our brains. So we shouldn't be too shy to be in a room with a couple who are long married and loving each other. Why should we be embarrassed if they kiss? So I think we have to get over the kind of birth images that come out of Hollywood that scare people so much. Yeah. I was not at this birth, but each one of these are midwives that I trained, and I picked the woman from my community that made me feel the most relaxed. I don't know any midwives today who have that privilege, but I consider myself extraordinarily lucky that I was able to do that. When Carol came, in fact, to join our community, I talked with her a few minutes and I thought, I want her. She will be a midwife. But she could not be her own midwife. You'll see that she needed the help of others when her baby's head was born and the body didn't follow. So she said, Mary, her midwife, said, the baby's coming, the head's here. She said, don't push too fast. And Carol said, I don't know if I can hold it. And Mary said, you'll be able to. And so she's making sounds. If you didn't see the picture, you would think they were making the baby. The sounds are very sexual, as in sexual pleasure. Ah, ah, like this. When we hear this sound, we know all is well. And so we're not in a hurry. Nobody's telling her to push. She just kept saying, oh, you're doing so well. Oh, this is very good, Carol, very good. These are the things that the mother is being told by her midwife. And you can probably see that there's a lot of love, or you can feel there's a lot of love in the room, and everybody trusts each other. She knows there's a camera in the room. In fact, she said, this is my last baby, and you can make a film of this because I want to show people they don't need to fear birth. Of course, she didn't know she would have this feared complication for which doctors would teach us you must break the collarbone and fracture the baby's bone. I thought, how painful for the baby. So I learned this when I went to Guatemala some years before this. I'll tell you that story in a minute, but let's watch this baby be born. So imagine the sounds are still and like that. These are the sounds she's making. And her husband is going, you know, a nice vibration. You know? That's how he helped. And now Mary, the midwife, is saying, oh, you're just coming over the widest part of the head. Notice you see no blood at all, no injury at all to the mother. The mother's body is as able to open as that of any other mammal. We just have to treat the mother as well as the other mammals treat each other. because the human is actually the only male that will interfere with the process of birth. Here she's going, oh, yeah, she's seems to be having quite a good time. Excitement, ecstasy. What's on the midwife's hand is a bit of oil. This could be cooking oil, almond oil, anything. Just not petroleum. No. Okay, you see the head is out. You'll see this with the syringe. Actually, it's not necessary. You see this is quite a fat cheek baby, and we don't see the neck as we normally would. And the seconds ticking off in the corner show us how many seconds have passed since the head came out. And this is not a concern. It's okay for a baby to wait this long. The baby's umbilical cord is supplying oxygen still to the baby, no problem. But now the midwife is starting to wonder, since she doesn't see the neck. And she can tell this is maybe the biggest baby the mother's had. So she's starting to think of changing mother's position. She does not think to break the bone of the baby. Okay, now we're thinking, oh, get on the side. It's going to be okay. But you mustn't pull very hard, and the baby doesn't have a good handle. So another midwife says, get her on her hands and knees, and this will give us better use of gravity and a bigger diameter of the pelvis. So look, she can move. No epidural. It's easy for her to move. And now notice what happens. Ah. And you can see how good the baby is, already moving. The feet and the hands and the fist is good. The baby feels her own cord that she's been playing with all the time inside the mother. Everybody's making happy sounds. And what a big baby, says the midwife. But this is not the biggest. We've had 2 pounds bigger than this, or a kilo bigger than this one. The baby's holding her cord. That's her plaything while she's inside. That's her friend. And you can tell what a healthy baby. That's a very healthy looking cord. So we know the mother had good nutrition. She didn't smoke cigarettes, because you can see these things reflected in how big or small that placenta and the baby are. Okay, mother says, okay. Did that work? No, where's my prize? Okay. Okay, 1981. So we were, maybe now we'll switch to the USB. And I'll take a little time to tell you first that I have been a midwife for about 41 years now, but that includes all of my training, because my training was on the job. As Mariella told you, I did not know of any way to learn to be a midwife in the United States, because my profession was eliminated a century ago. Shocking, but we had some leading obstetricians who were new specialists at that time, and there was almost no medical organization at that time. So there was nothing to set the limits to medicine, and in particular surgery, which was the most popular form of medicine in the United States in the 19th century. We had some good doctors, but the surgeons became the heroes. And they began to do a lot of unnecessary surgery, and they saw midwives not as help or something that a profession that women needed. They saw them as competition. And so they said, okay, we don't pay attention to Europe because we had that revolution already. Get rid of the midwives. And they lied to the people. They said Europe is getting rid of midwives as a relic of the barbarian past. An absolute lie. And the women didn't know this was going on because this was all in medical institutions and in medical publications that people had no access to. Now, my own background was that my father had been a farmer. His people for generations had been farmers. And the land was lost at the Great Depression. So my father, who was raised to be a farmer, suddenly had no farm. He did have a college education in farming, of all things, but that wasn't very useful when you had no farm. So my parents had a bit of a struggle to find a way to make a living, but they did. We lived rather frugally, but it was possible. And my mother, when I was 16 years old and asked her about birth, she says, a lot of people scream and yell, but it's really not necessary. And in the library at my hometown, I like to read books, and I found a book that was written by an English doctor named Grantley Dick Reed, Childbirth Without Fear. And this was a big seller in the 50s. I devoured the book. That doesn't mean I ate it. But I read the book, and he said that a lot of women have pain because they're so afraid. So the message I got from the book was, be brave, and your body will take care of you, but you must learn how to make a deep relaxation during this process and trust it. As a child, I used to imagine a lot of times that I was an animal because I admired dogs I used to read stories about dogs that saved people's lives, so I liked heroic dogs. Not the little yap yap dog so much as the dog that would save you from the fire or whatever. And then I also liked, when I was running, I used to want to be a boy for a long time, and I got over that, but I would be running and I would imagine I was a horse because I thought horses were good at that, better than people, because they could go faster. At any rate, when I had my first baby, I thought all I have to do is refuse anesthesia, just like the doctor said, and that the doctor would say, oh, how good, how brave. But he said, oh no, you're going to have a forceps delivery, so I must give you a spinal anesthesia. This was not an epidural. That was more dangerous than an epidural, which sometimes is dangerous. But is certainly better than having a cesarean with no anesthesia, right? Okay, and at that time, the cesarean rate in the United States was less than 5%. I didn't know anybody who had had a cesarean. What I didn't know was that 2/3 of women in my country had their babies pulled with forceps. If I had known that, I probably would have tried to get to Europe because that didn't happen here. Now, American doctors said women can't give birth because people in the United States are mongrels. An Italian will mate with a German, with a French person, with an Indian, an African person, and you get a baby with a really big head and a woman with a little... That didn't sound like science to me. That sounded like a really stupid excuse that a child would give. But they used to believe that. And so in that time, my doctor said you can gain no more than 6 kilos. I would get scolded. So I was starved through the second half of my pregnancy because this doctor was so ignorant. If I had gone to a general practitioner doctor, I think he would have allowed eating. He would likely have been born on a farm himself, and he would have had better sense. But the obstetricians were guided by a book that said every first baby could destroy the mother's vagina, vulva, and everything, at the same time that it gave the baby brain damage. And so that was the excuse for the forceps. We will deliberately injure you so that you don't injure yourself. Well, so I got to labor for a long time. So I got to experience labor, and I was not scared, I was not in pain. But then the horror part started when they came with masks. They put me in what looked like a medieval torture chamber. They tied me down. They did this anesthesia in my back. They pulled the baby out with a forceps, sewed me up. I never saw the baby for a whole day. And when they brought her back, I was split in my mind because I was afraid of her now. And I thought, I'm not even sure you brought me the right baby because she doesn't look like anybody I recognize. So this is a very deep psychological wound that was much deeper than anything physical. And I had a lot of trouble learning how to be a mother being treated so badly. And I knew you couldn't do that to a female animal and have her resume her motherly protection of her own baby. So that's when I met Stephen. After that, he became my second husband, and he was at the time leading this Monday night class that had been going on in San Francisco. Some of the women that came to this class every week, more than 1,000 people, had births like mine, and they rebelled, you know. So after 40 years of this crazy way of giving birth, more like 50 years of that, with women just enduring it, then we had a generation that said no. So some of us said, we'll stay at home. And one of the stories from these women was powerful to me. She had her second baby at home. It was in the countryside. She said, I had no pain this time. She got a nurse who worked in the maternity ward to pretend to be a midwife. And if she recognized a complication, of course they would go to hospital, but otherwise stay at home. The baby was born easily. She's sitting on the bed, admiring the baby, and they look at the window and see the neighbor's cows have walked up the lane and are looking at the window at the baby. And every time I tell that story, the hair on my arms raises, and I feel that spiritual energy that I felt when she told me that story. And at that time I thought, what if we feel that every time, but we only noticed it once or twice? And that one got told in stories and started a religion. Yeah, a religion based on kindness and fellow feeling and compassion. But we act like it doesn't happen every time a new life comes in. Because cows don't go and look in the window at people to see what we're eating, or they're vegetarians. So I thought, what if every birth, I think every birth is sacred. Well, that was really true when one of the women on the caravan, we had traveled, far across the country. We had 50 buses or so parked in a parking lot at a major university. A man came and knocked on the door and said, Stephen, come help me, my wife is in labor. And I was going to deliver the baby, but I'm nervous. And I knew Stephen had to talk to 300 people in the auditorium, and I saw my chance. I had never seen a photo or a drawing of birth. I'd never seen a video. I'd never seen a puppy born, anything. And I thought, well, this will begin my midwifery education. I should see a birth. So I did. I got 2 friends. They went with me. The mother had her baby in about an hour, and it was so beautiful, as you've seen here, but without the needing to turn over. And I never saw a woman look so beautiful in my life. And I thought, there's a special beauty that comes with this birth. The second birth took place about a week later. We drove to another state. And this time, I thought I should prepare a little, so I tried to read a book that would tell me how to resuscitate a baby. And that woman who had the baby that the cows came to look at, she snatched the book away from me and she said, "Don't read that, you'll make it happen." And in my mind I thought, that's superstition, but I wasn't bold enough to take the book back and find out what to do if the baby didn't breathe. And guess what? The baby didn't breathe. At that point, and this is where Stephen was my and our hero, a woman left the birth. She went to him and said, "The baby's born and everything's okay." But he could tell it was not okay. So he walked over quickly, picked up the baby, and said, in cases like this, very calmly, wiped off the baby's mouth and went with a tiny puff of air. She turned pink, cried really loud, and all was well. And I got the book and I studied, I memorized everything in it. We had another baby. We were then parked in Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is a special state because it's the one where the religious dissidents went when the Puritans got too mean in Massachusetts. They would throw out the people who were too liberal, and they went to Rhode Island. There was a knock on my bus door, and a man introduced himself as Louis Lapère. That's right, Louis the father, a gynecologue. He lived right next to the park, and he said, "I understand, I read in the newspaper that you have a master's degree in English literature and that you're working as a midwife, and would you like some training?" I said, "You're most welcome, come in, have some tea." I got my friends. He spent the morning with us and he taught us what to do in case of emergencies and gave us equipment. And the next birth that took place in Tennessee, we had several little minor emergencies, like the baby wouldn't breathe, the cord was around the neck 3 times, the mother hemorrhaged, and I had everything I needed to deal with it in the school bus. We never went to the hospital. We had 7 more babies before we decided we would put our money together, go buy some land in Tennessee, and there we've been ever since. Now, because I was an English major, I kept records. And we wanted to tell our story, so that turned out to be a good thing because even when I talk to midwives that work in hospitals, they have trouble believing that a baby that's not breathing at birth can revive so quickly as just a little puff of air would change a dead-looking baby into a live, screaming one. Because in hospital, when you have these situations, it's usually because the mother's been given medication that has gone through the mother system to the baby, and now this baby is under the influence of some powerful drugs and doesn't breathe so well. So it's much scarier to have that baby in that condition in a hospital than when you have a mother who's had no medication at all. So now I think you understand the motivation for my work. And here's a woman, we learned to give birth on the farm in a way where birth is fun. And when you make birth fun, it's healthier. And it's less painful because the mother gives some hormones from her own body that work better than the synthesized hormones work that are given through an IV or through an injection. Here's a woman, she knows she's going to have a 5-kilo baby. She can feel how different it is from having 3-kilo babies, what she'd had before. She's 47 years old. And so on the farm, we learned if it's hard, smile. Because then you get neuroendorphin and you also get oxytocin. Golfers know this, by the way. If you're going to you're playing golf and you're in a tournament and it's a difficult putt and your whole winning depends on this, golfers say, smile, you'll do better. Yeah. And this position is the one that a cow will choose, an elephant, a giraffe will choose this position. You would have the only mammal that would get on the back position with the legs in the air is the human. It's rather insane when you think about it that way. But mostly, you see, I got my education the way that non-literate traditional midwives got, because we learn from animals, we learn from women. We just pay attention to what women tell us and show us, and then we tell a story about it. Okay, here's a woman who taught me something a lot, very important. She was raised in Brazil. Brazil is a country where people have forgotten how to give birth unless they live in the far-off forest and the very poor areas. But if they live in metropolitan Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, and they go to a private hospital, 95% will get cut open to have the baby, 95%. They're afraid to give birth. They're afraid to feel even labor. And this is the richer women, obviously, but poor women also have way too many cesareans because the doctors have never seen a birth before. And so they're afraid, everybody's afraid of birth, except for the midwives who work in these far-off places, and then they get no respect. And even the World Health Organization thinks that, well, they didn't go to school. What good can they be? The problem is they should be teaching in the medical universities here and in Germany and England and America. Oh my goodness. Okay, now what is she doing? Well, she's having a baby. Again, a baby almost 5 kilos. And she is a doula herself as well as a translator. She was working in Massachusetts, and she knew that Brazilian women had this reputation of not being able to give birth very well. She wanted the midwife there to help her have a home birth, and she started to say yes, and then she says, oh, wait a minute, you're from Brazil. Now, if you're from Brazil and somebody insults you like that, I think you're going to try to show them that they're wrong. Anyway, she was like that. She phoned me, can I come to Tennessee and have the baby? I said, sure. Because she was actually born on the farm and then went back to Brazil to be raised. So I knew her mother was different, you know. Okay, so she said she noticed that the teenage girls from Brazil who could give birth were the ones that did not behave. When the doctor said, lay on that bed, they refused to obey. They got up and they moved all over the place. They acted like animals. Yeah, animals know how to give birth. So I showed her a video of a woman doing Moroccan belly dancing as prenatal preparation. So, and then she had the invention of using this stalk with a rubber tip on the bottom so it wouldn't slip on the floor, and she's doing this. To samba music. So every photo, I was the photographer because I had no other work to do. She did all the work, was taken when she was having a very strong, and I hate that word, bayan. So we think of a better word. I say a rush, or you could say a wave or a push, whatever. And words are powerful because if you tell a woman it's a pain, well, then she experiences it as pain. So that's, I say, we need a new word, better language. Look, she's in a trance. She's still moving. That samba music is pounding on. Smiling, swinging her butt around. Never showing any fear. Now her partner, this is, I think in German you call that Äpfelschütteln. It's like shaking the apple tree, the couples fall. And you might think it would hurt, but it actually is very relaxing. And if you're ever constipated, you could experiment with this. It would probably help. True. Men and women. And you pick the part of the body that has the most to shake, the bottom. Maybe it's the legs, maybe it's the side, but wherever the most stuff is, you shake it. Now she's rolling forward and backward. Yeah, making jokes and smiling and a bit mischievous. And she pushed him out. A lot of him. And that's Stephen's and my grandson, because that was our son there. You see how the head is shaped? The baby's head is meant to do that. It's not damaged, and in 2 hours it's, you know, the round shape that we usually see, but that's how brilliant nature is, to make these plates slide over so that the baby gets a nice beginning without hurting mom. And Here's a woman taking this technique outdoors on a spring day, a long labor, and she wanted to be in nature because she thought that would help her. Just like an animal, the woman, when she opens her mouth, her bottom opens better. And you could experiment sometime. You could do it now with me if you want, or you can do it later if you want to be private. But everybody has this place between, well, we call it the perineum, I think you call it the dam, and you make that tight, and you grip the muscle tight, and then at the same time while you're holding it tight, try to do this. And if you can do both, hold this one tight and do that one, you should tell me how it's done. I don't think it's possible. So that's some of the little tricks that I learned from women, just to want a baby to come, how to help her, and I observed that the woman has the open mouth, has the baby more easily. So no pushing like it should be, like that. Now, here we have, this is a good doctor. I wish he had, we paid attention to him in the 19th century. His name was George Engelmann. And he respected midwives. He respected the knowledge of traditional cultures. And so these were drawings made by doctors, usually military doctors. And you'll see different traditional peoples. These were Native Americans, Kiowa people. And I think the artist was not, didn't know how to put the feet on the ground. He didn't really mean that she's floating, but the point is she's standing, and look, she's using that staff just like the woman you saw with our grandson. Here's a woman using the rocking chair in a nice way. This is also a good position, open pelvis. And this is the way women want to give birth. Many women want to give birth here in Austria, in Germany this way. And in many places, they're not allowed to because somebody says, well, how can we get the CTG to work? And how will we know if the baby's heart's beating? Well, the answer is you have a midwife there sitting by her side, and every now and then you have a listen. You can also feel it in your body if you're a sensitive midwife. You don't have to have a machine for everything. Here we see the same thing. I'll go quickly through these. Notice how the women are upright, none of them on their back with the legs in the air. Here, we saw this a lot. People go out and grab the limb of a tree, not a pine, get an oak, good strong tree. Or, even the bed, if it's too cold outside. What's the husband do? Well, that helps. Here we see a technique for turning a baby round. You can turn a baby 180 degrees using cloth. And in the north, the Native Americans, this woman's from Mexico, very expert midwife. In the north, they would use an animal skin because in the farther north, they weren't weaving. Okay, now here's somebody you should know about. Famous midwife from Frankfurt, and in 1640s or so. Her name was Justina Sigismunden, and I don't think enough people know about her. She was the second one to write a book. It was very unusual for a midwife to write a book. First one was in Paris, Louise Bourgeois. Her book was translated into many languages. And so her story is that she solved an incredibly difficult obstetric problem in a time when there was no C-section available at the first birth she ever attended. So I identify a lot with her because it showed you don't have to go to an academy and learn from books and learn from the professor, this and that. Sometimes it's just common sense. Now, how did she get this common sense? She had an interesting story because when she was 21, she was pregnant, at least she thought so, and she went through months of pregnancy, getting the bigger and bigger belly and the sensitive breasts and no monthly period. And the midwife said, yeah, pregnancy's all normal. She went into labor. The midwife said, oh, your baby's in a good position, all's well. But days passed. Of course, she ate and drank because people did that in those days. And 3 more midwives were called in, and they all said, oh, yeah, baby's in a good position, everything's good. But toward the end of the 2-week labor, they started to say, but you're going to die, and the baby's already dead. Okay, so then her husband and her mother did something very intelligent. They called in a 5th midwife from a different village. She came and said something quite surprising. Number 1, you're not in labor. Number 2, you're not even pregnant. Scheinschwangerschaft. Okay, so some of you will know that there is such a thing. It exists in cows, it exists in horses, dogs. In the United States, people didn't even know what happens anymore. Obstetricians don't know. They diagnose it now at cesarean. Yes, we have some. It's been taken out of the textbook because they thought, oh, we don't need to put that anymore because we have ultrasound and we will. But now they can mistake some poop for a pregnancy, looking at it early, and then later when the poop doesn't get a heartbeat, as it never does, then they say, oh my goodness, the baby died, and then instead of waiting for the possibly dead baby to come out of the mother, which is what nature would do, they hurry on to a cesarean, and then they go, oops, you're not pregnant. Amazing. So this is one of my projects. Sigismundin, now back to her story. So she had this amazing experience. She's not pregnant. 4 midwives thought so. She thought so. And the one that knew better saw instantly it was not true. That midwife, I'm sure, put her hands on her, and she went, well, you got the big belly, you got the sensitive breasts, but you know what? Your uterus is tiny. I can't even find it. And that's how you diagnose it. You must use your hands. I find that in a growing number of countries, because we get so superstitious about ultrasound, we forget that lots of times boys are said to be girls, and what was said to be a girl turns out to be a boy. We make mistakes. Technology is not infallible, and when we lose our common sense, then it makes us stupid. So she came to a birth because she went to study some in the academy just by looking at pictures, drawings that have been made of difficult presentations. And a woman came to her and said, my sister-in-law is in labor. She has an arm hanging out of her for a day and a half. And of course, this is one that will kill the mother, kill the baby, unless you correct the situation. So she goes to the birth, sees for the first labor she ever saw, here's this blue-gray arm hanging out of the mother, and she thinks, that looks wrong. So she bent the arm, she pushed like this, the baby went back inside the mother, and the baby went, finally, somebody knows what to do, and came out head first and was alive. And now she was considered an expert midwife. I think with good reason. And then she got called to difficult births. She became the Mutter. She attended wealthy people. She solved big problems, and then she made her book. So you don't know about her because nobody made a statue yet, but I think it might be a good idea. Because she could also take care of another thing that C-section is done for today, and that is when the placenta comes first. She could save the mother and the baby by taking the instruments that used to be made to destroy the baby, and she used it in a life-giving way. She went through that placenta that was now bleeding a lot, just enough to open the amniotic sac. Water came out, and then the head came down, stopped the bleeding, and the baby was born. And the mother didn't have to recover from surgery. Genius. Okay, here's another photo of what a woman can look like when you are using the hormones that her body emits when there is no adrenaline in the room. How many here were born on a farm or know something of farms and animals? Not so many? Okay, any child that is raised around animals learns, don't make noise, don't go get curious when the cow or the horse is giving birth, the dog, they don't need you. They need you to leave them alone. They don't want to be watched. And it's the same with us. When something big comes out the bottom, most of us don't invite an audience. do we? Come, tell me how to do it. Come, yell at me. Push hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, unbelievable. But that's what we do. And by the way, when you have no anesthesia, when a woman is pushing a baby out, at first it feels like she's having a very, very, very big bowel movement, like, a watermelon or something. So it feels the same way, and you need the same courtesy that we give when we're doing the daily thing. This woman is having her first baby. You see me there with my hands. And she knows she's got there with just, during labor, she knows that to be in a good mood, to allow the body to take over and not to fight it is the best way to go. Okay, now, here's a woman who taught us something. She taught us that sometimes the woman doesn't even know she's in labor. In this case, she was having her first baby, the older boy, in her lap. She was cooking for all of these people, and her husband, a mechanic, was across town, and he had terrible attack of cramps. Very severe, severe cramps. He went home to lie down because he couldn't work. She worked all day, then she went home and found him in this condition of pain and suffering, and she massaged him into relaxation, made some food, they ate the food, and then she started to feel like she was catching the disease he had had and worried if this flu could affect the baby, so she went to sit on the toilet. And a few seconds later, she said, "Come help me, everything's coming out." Father put his hands down, the baby fell into his hands. The French anthropologists call that couvade. And when I talk to people from indigenous cultures, they all heard of that. Because sometimes it happens that the man gets the pain, the woman has none. And so he needs care. And I've seen this. And the interesting thing is that when we don't even know about it, and yet it can happen. But nobody knows how to make it happen, because if so, the men would always get the pain. And so here we see, we have lots of births at home. And this is, English major, apparently. I learned some things about critical thinking, and I learned something about the power of words. Don't use ugly words when talking about the woman's body. I think it's good to change this shamhar, shambine stuff to maybe shadambine and shadamhar. Yeah, let's talk a little prettier and get rid of the brustwarze, make it, the Norwegians say this is a breast bud. A nice idea, like a flower bud. Something that you'd want to put in your mouth. So very low C-section. And very low forceps. And here we see our doctor who helped us. He said, it was much like the midwife told me last night, that Dr. Alfred Rockenschab, whose picture, it'll take me a long time to find him. Oh, here he is. He's an Austrian. And Alfred Rockenschab is a genius. He was a very stubborn guy who had the very low C-section rate exactly as ours. So I think I'm going to, if nobody else does, I'm going to nominate him for the next Right Livelihood Award, now that we can see that somebody quite old, he's 90, but he knows how to make the C-section rate low here. He knows all about breech birth, and he should be famous, but he's not. And here he is last year. I hope to see him when we go east to Wien and to, because we're going next to Fürstenfeld after Innsbruck, yeah? And I know too many midwives that go to prison because they know how to do breech birth, because they help people not have C-sections. And so what we need to say is that the midwife who does home birth should not be a scapegoat. She should be a teacher. So we have to learn not to make the mistake that was made, which I call the Semmelweis syndrome, where the person who is inferior in status but right should get recognized. That is the mind change, the paradigm shift, where we have to recognize our experts are often the people who are now persecuted. And I have friends who are in prison for knowing too much. Thank you. I'm finished. Thank you.